belated Happy New Year to everybody. Joe Morrison, 49SAF Pod, recording this on the last day of January in 2018. So, yes, we will put out more content soon, and I debated making this session a two-parter. We've got a great conversation with Bob Gross of the Inlet Tower Hotel and Suites and Rick Thomas of both the Chariot and the Strive groups. These gentlemen have been in entrepreneurship for decades. They're incredibly experienced. Rick on the service business side, Bob on the real estate side, with his most recent venture actually being a real estate project that has an operating business embedded in it. So this discussion covers a lot of ground. It talks about, when it's time to leave ventures. It talks about employee stock option plans and employee stock option owned businesses. It talks about failure versus learning. And it talks about Alaska and Alaska's future and the changing workforce. So without further ado and without hearing more from me, let's just go to the interview, which is 40 minutes plus of wisdom from two incredibly smart people. I think you'll love it. Take care. I'm here with Rick Thomas of the Chariot Group and Bob Gross of the Inlet Tower Hotel and Suites. Did I get that right, Bob?
Correct.
And we're just going to talk with two of Alaska's entrepreneurial geniuses and gurus, people who have had decades in entrepreneurship that span a lot of their careers. And I've wanted to do this for a while. I think, Rick, I might have mentioned it to you as much as practically a year ago, and just haven't had an opportunity. So first, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. So what was the first entrepreneurial thing you did? And Rick, just jump in whenever. Bob?
Left a well-paid position working for Atlantic Richfield to go out and just try things on the street. Actually, I was going to go to college and try to get a master's degree in business, and I decided you can learn it in the street or learn it in the classroom, and I went for the street.
Yeah, and excuse me, I'm fighting a bit of that Alaska cold voice, like so many of the people today. For me, first thing I started was a fraternity in college. Me and 6 friends got together when I was 18, and we didn't want to join one that was on campus, and so we started a local chapter of a national. I think there's been in total about 7 different companies that I've started since that time. The most recent being a company called the Strive Group, which is a consulting organization that has a magazine as well called Strive. It's funny, I always get a chuckle when I mention the fraternity kind of thing, but it was the first business venture in the sense that it taught me to launch a nonprofit, articles of incorporation, how to organize within a group of 60 people that don't necessarily agree, how to market, things of that nature. As I moved on, I got a degree in finance, but my wife and I debate whether I'd get fired first or just I'd quit. It's a personality defect, I suppose. But I went to work as a insurance agent for New York Life. And it, again, continued to teach me the fundamentals of how do you invest in yourself? How do you lease your own office space? How do you go out and buy your own tools, buy your own computers? And it's a different mindset. And that was those two first experiences kind of built on a platform that was always there about, wanting to do my own thing.
So, Rick, everything you've done has always been bootstrapped. And Bob, of course, this is an awesome venue from which we're having this conversation. It's the conference room of your hotel on the 15th floor. I'm sure you needed equity for that.
Actually, no.
Okay, well, tell us about your experience with equity, raising equity, and tell us a little bit more about how you did this deal, and let's learn from you.
This project was born out of a need and a kind of an understanding of what some of the quasi-government entities in Alaska are trying to accomplish. Alaska Housing Finance Corporation's mission is to provide housing for the community, and workforce housing particularly, and some lower income housing. And they have programs that are backed by the federal government. They have some of their own funds that they'll put into projects that will support their mission. They didn't have much luck at that. Well, they're very good at what they do. But one of the challenges for them was they would go do a project that was all low income or workforce housing, and it kind of stigmatized the people that are in there. It was hard for those projects to compete and be financially successful. The typical to Alaska is we can look down south and see how others have done projects, and then we look like geniuses if we bring that idea up to Alaska. And the idea is multi-use. Have a project that provides workforce or low-income housing, but the other half of the project is commercial, multi-use. Has, for instance, this project has a restaurant in it, and it has hotel rooms in it. And I worked with the CEO of Alaska Housing, and we collaborated on putting one of the first, if not the first, multi-use project together in Alaska that they would finance. And we made commitments to Alaska Housing to help them match their goals of providing housing to workforce. And the other half of the project was to give it a commercial background or commercial element to it that could help make it financially successful. And that collaboration ended up with a very little to almost no capital put into the project to acquire it, because both parties were motivated to accomplish their mission.
And that, sir, is why I refer to you as a genius.
I was going to call you out on that for malpractice earlier in the beginning of this, because
I don't know. I mean, I think that is a great example of keeping your financial engine affordable that drives your business. And that is very hard to do. What you've accomplished, I mean, not just with the Inlet Tower, but the ability to structure a financial transaction that sort of benefits the community and enables commercial growth and creates jobs. How many jobs are you responsible for?
Well, directly about 60, but indirectly, much more, because those services that are required for this facility are provided by the community.
Right. And how many years into this are you now?
6 years.
How many years are you going to go?
Eventually, I will. I have found one of the ways to help motivate the young workforce that is here, the young managers that are involved, is to lay out a plan for an employee-owned business. That way, I have no desire to really retire, but I would like to slow down and back off. And a way to do that in a business like this is to put together an employee-owned business and everybody work towards that. So the number of years that takes, we'll see how good we are.
Fascinating. So we're going to go to Rick. And Rick, you're going to tell me about your life as a bootstrapper, right? You're going to tell me about how you went from the ideas in your head, the fire in your chest, not taking additional capital, and building the things that you've built.
Well, so the Chariot Group is the most current example within Alaska. My wife and I started the business out of a room in our house. We saw a need, interactive technologies, video conferencing, multimedia projectors. Those types of things were really coming into the market. So, we caught the wave, I think, at the right time. Had an aptitude for it. And, when you start something on your own like that, you go to the bank, and especially if there's no history, it's hard to get a loan, right? So we actually started our business on credit cards. We would buy from manufacturers And we had good personal credit, and we had 6 or 7 cards rolling. And we never paid a dime of interest. I got to give my wife and business partner credit for this. She managed to manage all that stuff through until we built up a credit line. So it worked for a while. I don't recommend it for everybody, but it's what we needed to get started. And so that was 18 and a half years ago. We've got 40 employees spread across 3 different states. And it's working. Now, we've had plenty of opportunity to leverage the business along the way. We've chosen not to because there are few industries as disrupted as the technology space. And so if we don't manage our cost of operations, it's pretty, and fly low to the ground, quite frankly. It's pretty easy to go out of business in a hurry between economic disruptions, technical disruptions. It's a crazy world out there. It's what I refer to as 3-dimensional chess.
So how are you dealing with all the disruption in the technology industry? Because we can all sort of have great video conferencing on our phones. It's in our pockets. A lot of that has probably aggressively hit your business. How are you coping with that?
It's a combination of things. One, first off, I think being disrupted over the past 20 years is now a competitive advantage because everybody's disrupted. I've had 20 years of practice. My company has, right? So if somebody, to quote a book that's been out for a long time and is, if somebody moves your cheese, you're kind of used to that. Polycom's a great example. There was a time when I started in the business where they just sold phones. Then they became the dominant force for video conferencing, and now they're struggling to matter in a world that is just ubiquitous video formats, right? Video conferencing. So from my perspective, you don't get attached to anything. You don't say, this is Rick's AV, because I may not always be in the AV business. I have to move. So now we provide services. There's a lot of systems and solutions out there that still need care and maintenance. And so we've stepped up that aspect of the business. So that answer?
That's a great answer. And I'm going to build off something you said and take it in a different direction. So here we go. You say don't get attached to anything. Is that something you really take to heart in the day-to-day operations of your companies? Or are you attached to things? And if so, what things are you attached to?
I would say, number one, don't get attached to your vision of who you are. When I say who you are, I mean, I don't think of myself as the owner of an audiovisual company, right? I think of myself as a creative entrepreneur that's out to solve problems. And then I'm constantly looking to the business or community environment to what problem needs solved next. So for example, for a long time, technology has been implemented, a lot of it, candidly, unsuccessfully. We've all experienced that in our businesses to where we implemented and did not achieve the outcomes we initially envisioned. The reason for that is, well, you didn't incorporate the 2 other I's that go with innovation, and that's an implementation strategy. We got so enamored with the technology, we forgot the fundamentals. And the fundamentals were just good planning and project management. And then in today's day and age, more important than ever in the past, is you have to combine those 2, innovation and implementation, with imagination. Because if I don't include the possibilities of what's to come in my planning format and do just what's happening today, I'm already behind. I will lose.
Come on, Bob. What are you attached to at the Inlet Tower, or are you attached to nothing?
Well, we're not a technology industry. We're a service industry. We're providing a service, and it's guest service. So we have to stay pretty attached to that mission. And yes, the vision and the mission that we talk about with our management is a living document. It changes, but we're very firmly focused and attached and very clear that guest services is the difference between an independent boutique property like this surviving in a market with the Hiltons and the Marriotts of the world.
Well, let me add to that, because I don't want to give you the wrong impression when I say don't attach to anything. I mean, anything is from a manufacturer, specific, technology, things of that nature. What I think you do need to attach to, and Bob just spoke to that, is your value set, the service component. So I can tell you that 18, almost 19 years ago, when we formed the Chariot Group, we had 3 values, and they haven't changed. Be profitable, maintain respectful relationship with everybody we do business with, and do really good work. And those aren't in order of priority. Those are just the 3 legs of the stool. So there is an attachment point, but it has to be value-based.
Well, listen, the reason I'm harping on this is one of my business mentors, probably 6 or 7 years ago, said, he was a technology entrepreneur, and he built a technology ticketing business in a Latin American country. And he got an offer to sell it before the .com crash. And he's, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm loving what I do. I'm absolutely adoring it. And his lesson was, I will never be sentimental about a business again. So that's why I ask. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you can't get too attached, but because, especially in Alaska, the roller coaster ride's going to take you up and down. But I personally have been more of a startup mindset. I like to take projects, start them up, knowing that Alaska is a commodity economy and it's going to go up and down, and real estate can get hit pretty hard with that. I would do urban renewal projects, start them up, and then turn them over. Now that would be a 1 or 2 year cycle, not a flip as it's talked about in the industry now. But so I never got emotionally attached to a particular project, even though a lot of energy went into it. I got attached to the process of starting up another one.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. In you have to be emotionally attached in the sense that it's where your inspiration comes from. You have to have a vision. There's too many long hours and just too much risk and all these other things. If you pencil it out on paper, you're gonna think, oh, what am I thinking? So you've got to have that be attached to the passion that goes with that. What you have to also do is keep your ego out of it. You just have to be, as I mentioned before, somewhat detached to make the business decision along the way, like your friend referenced. And I had a similar, situation in my history where I looked back and I went, oh, maybe I should have done something different.
Well, now that you've opened that can, I've got to go there.
Oh, it was back in the insurance days, and whether I should stay or not, and I stayed longer than I should have. And it's where I learned that when you move away from something, you're always leaving some chips on the table, right? And sometimes you hold on too tight. So mine's the reverse scenario, where I stayed longer than I should have.
Did you miss an opportunity, or did you just not get started on your next opportunity as quickly?
I got too attached to the opportunity and quit having fun. I didn't enjoy the work anymore, but I was afraid to leave behind what I had built. So it was the reverse of your example with your friend who was holding on because he was having fun and was riding the wave up and saw the stars, right? And in my case, it was like, I hate this, but I had this vision of myself as to who I was, what I was doing was all tied to that profession at the time, and looking back on it, I would have left earlier.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating thing to discuss, is when it's time to move on and how you move on effectively. I think that you're bringing up something that's really powerful, Rick, which is not necessarily a failure, but a lesson. I'm sure you guys have had ups and downs along the way. Bob, tell me about one of your failures, something you really learned from, but that hit you hard.
I don't really see it as a failure. You look back on it and grade it, and it was a lost opportunity. I decided the strategy of start up, get it back on the real estate, back on the tax rolls, give it value, and then sell it and move on. And I've consistently done that. And this project may be the last one that I don't follow that pattern because of what I mentioned earlier. I think I'm almost 161 years old, I tell people, but I'm ready to just stay with a project and see it through a longer fruition. But looking back at it, one of the projects I did is we purchased a half a city block downtown Anchorage in the early 90s when the real estate was at a very, very low. The Hunt brothers, tried to corner the silver market. They lost a half a city block downtown Anchorage, and we negotiated the purchase from the Hunt brothers liquidating trust. That adventure turned into traveling down to the west coast of the United States in the early 90s and going to every one of the craft brew pubs and that existed. It was an industry in its infancy, but we brought back all the best ideas we could find in California, Washington, Oregon, and Colorado, and then built the Brewhouse restaurant. And I stayed with my pattern, started that business up, and then moved on. But looking back at it, I've been a much smarter move to stay involved in that project.
And that's a great story. Not a lot of people know that you helped and were involved in like the purchase of an entire city block in Anchorage during the recession. So thank you for bringing that up.
I don't know why I was gravitated to urban renewal projects downtown, but it's been like a half a dozen of those opportunities, and they still exist. You can look at buildings that have problems, wherever they're located in Anchorage, and try to come up with a plan of to renovate them.
Just briefly, I want to go back to the topic of failure, right? And Bob referenced it. You can't look at things as failure. Education costs money. It always costs money. Sometimes it costs you money in a business project, but you learn from it. It'll cost you money in college, and it costs you money throughout life. So that's that part. From an Alaska perspective, I think, and we're seeing this, I think, politically right now, in that people are either attaching to the traditional ways things have been done, or they're attaching, they're more comfortable with disruption and ready to chase some new and different things. I think Alaska's facing that same fork in the road. Are we going, kind of the oil economy, fishing, natural resources, that kind of thing, and we're staying attached to that, and that's our tax base? Or should we, in addition, go looking for other types of revenue sources to broaden our tax base? I would say that we need to broaden our tax base. Now, whether that's a server farm on the North Slope because we know how to do shared services. Cooling is a huge issue for server farms. So clearly cooling on the North Slope isn't an issue. You get the idea. And this isn't a new concept, right? It's just one example. But I think a general diversification of how we view ourselves. I'll give you another example. There's a Professor Dr. Ed Hess out of the Darden School of Business. I heard him speak, and he said, over the next 5 or 6 years, 6% of jobs will be displaced by artificial intelligence and robotics. And we tend to think of those as automated vehicles and so forth, but some of that artificial intelligence are going to be replacing Google programmers and Microsoft programmers and people that are in the IT space. These are people that are highly educated and will leave their jobs with some money in the bank. And they're going to start new businesses. And when they start those new businesses, because of the technology, they can live anywhere. Well, who's got some clean air, open spaces, all the benefits of Alaska? So why not start trying to attract people that are entrepreneurial in nature? If India can compete, which is what they're doing, right, in that manner, can't Alaska be the launching point for some of these ideas and businesses and so forth? So there's a couple of concepts.
To your question and what Rick was referring to, I think providing more residential occupancy in our central business district would be a catalyst. Good for our city, good for our community. I've visited some of the cities have visited outside Alaska, like Vancouver, Canada. They have a very vibrant central city business district with a very good percentage of residential occupancy in it, and it just gives a life to the downtown. And you can look all over the lower 48 at cities that have not done that, and it's just decay. So to answer your question, what could we do to I think look for opportunities in downtown Anchorage to add more residential occupancy.
So, what's the opportunity in front of us right now when arguably Alaska's having a tough time?
Well, I'm going to focus on real estate because I've been involved that a little bit more than other types of projects. And these cycles that we have in Alaska create opportunity. There's no way you're going to predict the peaks and the valleys, and you're making a huge mistake to try to do that, but you can and see the trends. And in my lifetime, there's been three or four cycles, and if you can acquire real estate in those low cycles, and it only takes a few years for it to cycle back, that's opportunity. In other markets down in California or places, it might take half your life to go through one of those economic cycles. So our commodity economy is a two-edged sword. It provides some opportunity, and it can also hurt if you time it wrong, but yeah, step out there and give it a try.
I think, somebody a couple of years ago said, Rick, aren't you concerned about what's going on with the oil prices right now? And they had great concern in their eye. And my response was, I started my business in 1999. The dot-com crash, 9/11, Afghanistan, Iraq, Enron, Global Crossing, and the greatest financial crash since the Great Depression. It's another year, right? We have had the good fortune of most of us growing up in, although I guess I'm older now, right, at 55. I grew up in a pretty stable time, and for many business leaders that are in my age group, it's hard to comprehend an environment that is unstable and going to be unlike anything that we recognized in the past. But I think largely that's the case. There's a lot of changes coming. We hear about them all the time. But that isn't necessarily bad. Sometimes things break wide open in a good way, and we have tremendous opportunity before us. Bob and I are sitting here, and we have this title of entrepreneur, which I'm proud of the ability to have an idea and then turn it into something. I think we're all going to have that opportunity to look at things differently and put a little sweat equity into it and reinvent things going forward. So I think that's the opportunity that lies ahead for Alaska's population and Alaska's leadership, political leaders and business leaders, is we're going to get an opportunity to reimagine where we're going. And we're already seeing that. Oil is at $50 a barrel. Nobody's expecting it to go up. And guess what? The oil producers are figuring out how to work in that environment. And they're using imagination to solve problems. And so I think good things come from challenges.
So what didn't I get to that you want to talk about? That's a good open-ended question. I do have a final question, but what is it that I didn't cover that you really want to discuss?
It's not directly related to some of the topics, but I think it's very pertinent in that, with all these changes, the workforce is changing. And for me, in my generation, I've got a lot of younger aged middle management working in this project. And they is a whole different way of working with them than when I was at the Air Force Academy or working for the oil industry in the 80s. And it's been a huge challenge for me to recognize that and try to find the ways to move it forward in a positive way. And the word collaboration is probably the key word that I have focused on. For instance, in our organization, rather than it being showing a organizational chart that's hierarchical with someone at the top and the owner, and then everybody reporting to them, we have developed, and I find it very helpful with the younger generation to draw a collaborative organizational chart and try to function collaborative. And that looks more like the wheel of a bicycle. And instead of, and if myself being the owner manager of the business, I'm just in the center of it. And there's positions around me that I facilitate the collaboration between the facilities department, the leasing department, sales and marketing. And I find that is much more motivating for the individuals that are of a younger generation rather than a hierarchical style.
Dennis McMillan, founder of the Four Acre Group, does a talk on that exact topic that Bob's referencing. And he wrote an article in the latest Stride magazine called Forward Leadership. And he talks about that whole the move from hierarchical leadership to a networked collaborative system, right? And so I agree with Bob 100%. And I'll even take it one step out from that and say that businesses are going to need to do the same thing. We are living in an environment that is incredibly complex. We've got 4 generations in the workforce, new technology showing up every single day, economic challenges, as I just mentioned. What year is it? There's something new that's catastrophic, right? So you can't be a business or an organization that operates in the old model of holding your cards close and not talking to anybody. The walls need to come down between customer and provider and suppliers, and we need to have different types of dialogues.
All right, final question. This is your opportunity for your nugget of wisdom to somebody who's starting something up. So you guys have done this. Rick, you've done it multiple times. Bob, you've done it multiple times. You've done it with real estate in a variety of ways. Rick, you've done it with service businesses. So, there's a whole generation plus, entrepreneurs, startups. It's not just about people in their 20s or 30s or 40s. It runs the spectrum, right? Great people are starting businesses in their 50s and 60s. What is your gem of advice for somebody who's about to start something new in Alaska? Give me your nugget.
I hold on tight. I can't say that this is to, somebody starting a business, in Alaska right now, but I would say just the view of entrepreneurism, right? It certainly has a sex appeal to the term, and wow, I'd like to own my own business and all of this other stuff. I can tell you that it's a lot of work, right? And there's some risk, and it has a fair amount of instability to it, and nobody gives you a user's manual. When you start your business, they don't hand you a book and say, this is how this works, right? Businesses like ours depend on a lot of hardworking people. And it's important that there are people out there that just love their jobs, right? That are the support infrastructure, that are the enabler, right? So to the I guess I'll close with this. The entrepreneurial person sitting out there getting ready to start your business, there will be nothing more important than your people. They define whether you will succeed or not, unless you're going to be a sole proprietor. And then there are some limitations to that because there's only so many hours in a day. Invest in your people, treat them right, and they'll get you where you want to go.
I would say just don't hesitate. Go out and give it a try, because there is not a better time to do it than now. The technology, the information, how businesses work now, it's much more of a level playing field, and just go forward knowing that it's a continuing education. You will have some wins, you'll have some losses, but you'll learn something from both of them.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to chime in and say we were talking about this earlier before we got on to the program here, and we launched Strive magazine with 4 people. It's a magazine that's being read in India, South Africa. It's being the Philippines, Japan, and it's published by 4 people working out of Alaska. So absolutely, I agree with you. Dive in.
Right on. Well, that is it from the 15th floor of the Inlet Tower Hotel and Suites. We've got Rick Thomas, we've got Bob Gross, we've got Joe Morrison, 49SAF Pod. We're signing off and listening to on the way home, 80s supergroup, The Power Station. And what you're going to miss from us is a robust discussion of the Duran Duran Group on guitars and whether they did a good job in those tracks. See you, everybody. Bye-bye.
So a quick little aside I have to throw in is I was in Hawaii when the missile alert came in on my phone. And then last night I got the tsunami alert. So I've gotten 2 alerts in 2 weeks. So it's becoming a trend.
I'm not going to hang out with you really closely, Rick, if you go somewhere and first missiles are headed at you and then earthquakes follow you.
At least they're both false alarms.